Good morning, everybody. This is Tommy Danielson reporting from California. We are on, today is June 28th. We're back online again. So a lot of people dialing in last night. We thank you for that. A record number of people stopped by. So that's cool. This is early morning, so we're not expecting so many to dial in today, but you can also, of course, watch on the 7 channels where we're distributing in this content. We wanted to talk a little bit about the Europe. What will happen when you are traveling to Europe? Most of you a lot of people are traveling to Europe this summer. The restrictions have been lifted, and you don't have to test when you come back to the United States. So it's as close to free travel. But there's a couple of bumps in the road, just like we see here in the US. Rudy, by the way, he's going to be joining us a couple of minutes. But I've had my dear friend from Scandinavia, who is the guy in Scandinavia who's got the most. Oh, Harris, actually, Rudy. Let's just bring him in as well.
Morning. Sorry.
Morning, Rudy.
Morning.
Rudy's in California now, so he's sleeping in a little bit.
I was reading the New York Times and got sucked into.
You got sucked into. Okay, there you go. So I was just introducing Fleming. Fleming is a dear friend of ours, and he's the foremost expert on miles and points and general travel in Scandinavia. And he runs the website finalcall.travel in both the Danish and the Norwegian language. And Fleming, and I traveled around Scandinavia, and I noticed the disruption to an extent, but it was mostly smooth sailing. But with the government struggling with the airports, now there are other worries about a lot of strikes. There has been a strike. Can you put us up to speed for those who are traveling into Scandinavia right now?
Right now, it's basically a mess all over Europe. But especially in Scandinavia, we've had a strike for quite some time in Norway. Luckily, it ended today. But then you have the SAS pilots negotiating right now in the final minutes almost, where they could actually start a strike from Wednesday.
What was the strike that just ended in Denmark?
That was in Norway, actually. The strike here. That was the flight technicians. Okay. And because all of them were locked out, with the situation in Norway with long distances and everything, then
so literally today or this week the deadline for SAS pilots to reach a contract agreement.
Yeah, it's basically, I think it's actually at midnight today.
Tonight, yeah, it's later your time, obviously, than here. 10 hours later or so than it is here in California. Wow.
And so let's talk a little bit about the mechanics, the airplane mechanics, has an impact on all airlines because these are contractors that work for various companies and handle the vast majority of the airlines. And it was a lockout, meaning that the employer refused to give them work, if you will. So what were the demands and why was this strike really to somebody who's outside of the industry? It seems like right now that all these airlines are struggling, SAS and all the other airlines are struggling. Why was this strike so difficult, the one that just ended?
One of the mechanics in Norway was basically a question about salary. Right. I think they demanded a 17% raise, whereas everybody in the country got 3.5 or 3.7. And obviously there was a bit of discussion about that. So that ended in a strike and a lockout. And at the end, because the employer locked out everybody, then also because of the structure in Norway with the long distances and everything, then you also had problems with ambulance flights. And that was actually why the government went in and said this strike has to end right now, and we're going to decide where it's going to end. We don't know where it's going to end, but they started working now because the government.
Right. So it was a forced ending to that conflict. The conflict hasn't been resolved because of ambulance flights, and we also saw that Widerøe had the biggest disruption because they have a lot of old airplanes. They have the Dash 100s and 200s, which hasn't been manufactured in decades. So obviously the upkeep of those airplanes that serve the small airports in Norway is much more than you see for regular line maintenance on other airlines, and that's over with. Now we're talking about the pilots and SAS, and that's a little bit more complex thing. So what they are fighting for, can you explain? It's not just the salary; it's also the way that they are employed in the company.
I don't really think it has much to do with salary. I mean, I was actually just writing an article right now to published later today.
Well, it always has to do with money.
But it's extremely complicated here.
Right.
Because historically, unions has been extremely strong in SAS, and they basically went on strike whenever they disagreed with anything, and the company didn't really have any choice to follow their demands. And it's been like that for decades.
Right.
Then before the pandemic and also during, SAS has seen the chance to split up the company with like daughter companies or sub companies where they are like SAS Connect, SAS Link, like commuter companies, where they have different unions in them. So they kind of split up the union's power. And they don't really talk much about it. I mean, they say that they want the fired employees during the pandemic to come back in their original company on their original contracts. SAS says those jobs are not there anymore. They're in a different company with different unions and different salaries. So
Right.
that's basically what they're struggling about. And of course, then you have different unions coming in, so they are also struggling about. They don't like to see that all the new employees they pay their monthly fee to a different union. But that part they don't talk about for obvious reasons.
So let me get this. So we have I noticed that I flew SAS intra-Scandinavia, meaning I flew from Stockholm to Oslo, from Oslo to Bergen, from Bergen to Oslo, that kind of stuff. And I flew to Evenes. I flew back from Evenes. It was normal SAS crew on those flights. But then I flew from Copenhagen to London, and that was British crew.
Yeah. I mean, they started years ago with SAS Ireland, and that changed name to SAS Connect. And actually, a lot of the crew there is based out of Copenhagen now also.
Okay.
So yes, negotiating with a number of unions in other words, are all the unions for these?
They're only negotiating with like what can we call it, the old SAS.
So these unions haven't all gotten together to negotiate in unison.
They've come together in Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, but only the unions that are negotiating on behalf of mainline SAS.
Okay.
But then you have SAS Connect, for instance, that originally was supposed to fly like leisure routes. That was the original excuse for that. But we've seen over time that they basically fly everything. You can have them on domestic flights in Norway or in Denmark and Sweden also. So they basically took over a lot of production from mainline SAS with the Airbus 320 Neo. That's basically what they're struggling about. Then you have SAS Link. They only have one aircraft at the moment. They fly Embraer. So they're not a big threat right now. I think the unions are actually okay with like a commuter airline like that could make kind of sense. But the big issue is SAS Connect, because they basically took over the production from mainline.
So what's the takeaway for, say, U.S. travelers about to go to Scandinavia? Be wary about, follow tonight's, or if there is a resolution tonight.
I'll take a deep breath until tomorrow, at least, okay. Where we know what's going to happen. I'll say half the flights are still operating, because if they're operated by SAS Connect or SAS Link or one of the subcontractors that fly like turboprops and stuff like that, then they will still operate. So if you want to book something for the upcoming weeks, stay away from SAS mainline and book a flight which is operated by SAS Connect, SAS Link, X-Fly, CityJet, or whatever they're called, the subcontractors.
Mm-hmm. But if you're coming from the US, book some other airline.
You could do that as well. I mean, it's gonna be a mess. But it's a mess everywhere in Europe right now. I mean, Lufthansa is canceling a lot of flights. EasyJet is canceling a lot of flights. KLM is canceling flights. So I mean, no matter where you go, it's gonna be a mess this summer. Probably
no problem here. We have no problems here in the United States. So.
Right. Yeah. So what I saw yesterday, obviously, was that the SAS pilots are pretty aggressive on Twitter, and they also got responses from angry Scandinavians going on vacation. So I don't think there was a lot of sympathy to find. I mean, at the end of the day, we're kind of looking at in the U.S., they get even less sympathy because the Southwest pilots makes $282,000 a year on average, meaning that a lot of people, the highest paid pilot in Southwest makes over $500,000. But in Scandinavia, they really don't make that much money, right?
It depends, because
Right.
they have a pretty decent salary if they have high seniority. And that's actually what is SAS's problem right now, because they fired with the entire seniority system in the industry during the pandemic. They fired all the younger and cheaper pilots. So now they only have the old ones left that are way too expensive. And they have a really good package there. I mean, some of them actually negotiated their salary package a long time ago, where they were actually supposed to retire when they turned 60. They won a lawsuit years ago that they were actually allowed to continue after that. So they're basically double dipping right now, while at the same time keeping the younger pilots out, which makes the operation extremely expensive for SAS. And of course, keeps the average salary very, very high.
Right. So, yeah, but it's not just SAS. I want to also make note of that. There also are other strikes that are looming and that are having impacts on things. Ryanair, for example, it's been going on for a little bit of a time with Ryanair, about the week and a half now. And 2% of all flights, Ryanair, they do have a lot of flights, especially in the summer. So we're talking some massive numbers of cancellations here with them. So it's the cabin crew that are so it says less than 2% of 9,000 flights. That is
about 200, a little over 200.
Right. So it's still substantial, right? It's not that much many obviously, because it's some areas.
Yeah, but you could say with Ryanair, it's the way they're structured with so many bases in so many countries, and they don't really have unions to deal with in the same way as other competitors. It will never really spread to be a huge strike.
Right.
With them. It will be very limited to certain areas in a short amount of time. And then Ryanair have so many bases, they'll simply just scale up on other bases and take over.
It's interesting though, Fleming. In the States, the problem is staffing and aircraft.
Yeah.
Whereas even Ryanair is a labor force slowdown. The crew unions apparently in Belgium, Spain, Portugal, France, and Italy, wanted to have a strike action over the weekend. So, and Spain's coming up June 30th and July 1st and 2nd. So it's sort of different. It's not, Ryanair hasn't run out of planes or staff. It doesn't look like. Their problem is also, like SAS, a labor issue.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, you have staff issues all over Europe also, but they can basically blame themselves because they were too slow to get people back to work. Now there are other legal restrictions of getting your access ID to the airports and stuff, where with new EU rules for that, so it takes much longer than normally. Mm-hmm. So it was basically just because the airports and the airlines were too slow to take people back, and also the airlines, they don't really know what awaits them in the fall, so they don't want to take too many people back during summer. So it's a tough balance. I
mean, it is a tough balance because it's there's especially specifically a Ryanair that has so many flights in the summer, and that's where the bacon is made, right? So, but we can't talk about
the booking numbers right now. I mean, every flight in Europe, they're full.
Right.
I mean, we're having a trip planned to Thailand with the connection in Europe, and I was just to be prepared, checking out what alternatives did we have if SAS cancel. Luckily, it's SAS Connect, but it's one of the subcontractors, CityJet. If they cancel, but which options do we have?
Right.
But I mean, basically, there were not any seats available 5 days before and 5 days after between Copenhagen and Zurich. All flights were full.
So here in the U.S., we're seeing the airlines having big sales. As Southwest was having a couple of weeks ago, they had a 40% off for the September through for the after summer period. What do you think demand is going to look like in Europe with recessions, high interest rates, and among other countries, Norway? How do you think demand is going to look in the fall?
I think it's going to be a tough fall and winter, to be honest, because nowadays the summer is not a problem. They basically sell everything to sky high prices. It's completely insane. I mean, to the Mediterranean, you pay more for an economy light ticket than you will usually do for a full fare business class ticket.
Right.
It's insane right now.
Right. I just,
but the fall and the winter, it's going to be tough.
right. And so it's the same as here. And I literally just paid another business class ticket from Stockholm to Los Angeles, which is a market where Finnair has gone a direct attack on SAS, flying from nonstop from Stockholm to LAX. With SAS, you have to go through Copenhagen. And I find the flight to be extremely convenient that SAS has, because it leaves early in the morning and gets into LA at 11:30 a.m. as when I landed a couple of weeks ago. And I only paid $1,500 round trip from Copenhagen or from Stockholm to LA and back in paid business class, which is a pretty decent deal. And but I also checked just out of curiosity now in the summer, and it was more than double. So
yeah, flights are simply full. I mean, if you check random days, more often than not, you won't be able to buy a ticket. They're full.
Right. I will say, so I did fly over here on the June 7th. I flew from Copenhagen to here, and that flight was more than half full. I mean, business class was half full, and economy was also very, but obviously everybody in Europe takes their vacation at the same time, so it's a little bit different than here.
When school vacation started here a week or two ago, depending on country, then that was basically when it changed. I mean, you can't. It's very hard to get a flight, even if you don't care about how much it costs.
Right.
Yeah, my family lives in England, Fleming, and all the school holidays, no matter what school you're going to, are the same. And the airlines know it, and the hotels all over Europe know it. And so, the fares, I mean, it's easy pickings for the airlines because they know. Whereas in America, holidays are all different, so they can't quite do it all the time. Is it the same way in Scandinavia, or all pretty much the holidays exist?
It is, but if we compare the price level this summer to before the pandemic, the prices are still much, much higher right now.
Right.
Yep.
So speaking of the last thing I wanted to bring up, I have a couple of things to, so obviously there is also, you can't talk about strike and not bring up Air France, which is they've got the black belt in striking, and that's I guess it's a French thing, but there was a disruption on the 25th. It wasn't felt, but the unions are saying there might be other looming stuff going on there. So I think that the three airlines we're talking about now, where we found that might be disruption, look out for Air France, look for Ryanair, and look for SAS Mainline. If it's operated by SAS Connect and SAS, what was the other one?
Link, and the subcontractors like CityJet and XFly and whatever they call, they'll still be on. Hopefully, still be on schedule, but they haven't. They are not going to go on strike, at least.
Right. Yeah. So I feel like at the end of the day, what we're seeing here is the Americans are just what the U.S. did, what the airlines in the U.S. and it's always been like that. It's always been a focus on shareholders and profits more than your customers and passengers. That's always been the focus for a U.S. carrier. So what happened during the pandemic here was that the airlines were offering the senior pilots and the senior cabin crew a lot of money to retire early. So they literally got salaries throughout their whole gap period before and also full retirement after they left. So a lot of pilots took advantage of that. So now they are having problems finding pilots altogether. Southwest still has 100 planes. As of I don't know if that information is fresh, but I'm still noticing here where I live, where Southwest is over 50% market share, that a lot of flights frequency is still terrible. I mean, it used to be 15, 20 flights a day to the LA area, and there's like, 1/3 of that still, or half of that still. There's an afternoon gap. I always buy a flexible ticket when I fly into LA because gate situations at Tom Bradley and things like that. When I come on an international flight, I have to fly another less than an hour flight here. And there's a big gap in the afternoon. If I miss the flight that leaves at 1, there's not another one until like 5:30 or 6.
Well,
So
flights between San Francisco and LA, which is a 1-hour jaunt. I mean, there's one at 9 p.m. After 5, there's
Right.
anything. It's ridiculous. I mean,
right. So Southwest
picking up in either city can't get back to the other one after 5.
Right. Yeah. So we're definitely not back to full force here. As the other airlines, they might have allocated equipment, on international flights that are more profitable. For Southwest, they don't fly that much. They got some destinations down in the Caribbean and stuff like that. But at the end, that's kind of what they have. But they don't typically fly that much internationally. And since that's the case, you can feel it here on the domestic that they are not back. They had, what was it, 100 planes that are unused on the ground still?
That's what you said the other day.
So that was a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if that's still current, but they're still struggling to get back. In Europe, it feels like they got the manpower to do what needs to be done, but the airports don't have the manpower to do what needs to be done. They haven't, they have to be trained in this security screening. And of course, going through Stockholm Airport, the closest I've been to missing the second flight of my life was a couple of weeks ago. The arrogance of the people working at the airport, and I don't say anything because there's just no point. But there was this lady in front of me. Who was this guy coming up, and he said, it's just they don't even care. There's just one lane.
That's
open.
nothing new, Tommy. It's always been like that in Stockholm.
Yeah, I know. I hear you. It's just an interesting fact that how the two markets are a little bit different and what the problems are. They both have problems that they're kind of different. Here we don't have a problem with security. We have Clear, we have TSA PreCheck. We got those tools working really well for frequent flyers. While the fast track at Stockholm could be, I don't know, an hour and a half.
Yeah, but it's a mayhem in Stockholm. Luckily, it's better most other places. In
Right.
Oslo, it's pretty good. In Copenhagen, they had a few weeks where it wasn't good, but now they're kind of back on track.
Copenhagen didn't have any lines in fast track though. They had 45 minutes line in the general area.
But I mean, they could have that in a normal summer also.
Yeah, but that's normal stuff. That's something you need to expect when you're out traveling. But if you are on the road and you travel 200 flights a year, like I do, if the reality is it's an hour and a half wait in fast track security, a product that you pay for.
But I mean, we were in Stockholm about a month ago or something, and we basically decided to take this 7-hour drive up there instead, just to avoid Arlanda Airport.
Right. All right. So in conclusion, I tell you, Rudy, did you have anything else you wanted to share this morning, or?
Well, we're talking live Tuesday, June 28th. And so if you happen to have a copy of the New York Times or have a subscription to look online, there's a short piece, but an interesting piece on the renovation, or the rebuilding of Notre Dame, which of course suffered that huge fire in 2019. Apparently, it's going to be ready for services and some visitors by the Olympics in 2014, according to the designers. And after a sort of worldwide, or at least Europe-wide architectural contest, if you will, or search, the design for Notre Dame is going to be quite different. It's going to be very heavily treed. There is going to be more pedestrian streets around it. It's going to be much greener. And sort of a very interesting thing, there's going to be on very hot days, they're going to keep the big open front in front of the cathedral with the stone walkway, or not walkway, but plaza, I should say. And on very hot days, they're going to flow a very thin wafer of cold water over the entire plaza as people walk through it, which shouldn't bother their shoes, but it'll give them nice pictures, glistening pictures, but it will also cool the whole area down, which I've never quite heard of anything like that on a pedestrian mall. So.
I think they have it at the Malpensa airport. When you walk through that tunnel to the car rental pot stuff, they have something similar. They have you walk through a like a gentle breeze of water on the hot days of the summer.
Where's that?
Malpensa Airport in Milan.
Oh, Milan.
Yeah, so that little tunnel you walk through to get to the train station and to the car rental place, they have that in the summer. I noticed that I was there about a month ago.
There's going to be a little sheet of water, and then there's going to be a lot of trees and a whole sort of green sward going all the way to the main part of Ile de Cité. And it's going to be a much greener, more almost forestry surrounding around it when they plant the trees and get it going. Anyway, it won't be completely rebuilt by then, but it'll be usable, they say, by 2014 for the Olympics when they're in Paris. That's it.
Cool. And I also, for one thing, I did get I don't know if this has been covered. I haven't seen it covered. I got a tip. Somebody just emailed me that I thought was kind of interesting for news, aviation news about the future and the environment and stuff. It seems like the government in the Netherlands are planning to force Schiphol Airport to drop 60,000 flights per year in order to lessen the international flights, and because of the environment, they're going to cap the number of flights that they can have at this airport. Did you hear about this, Fleming?
Yeah, I did, and I think what will happen is they will move some of the cargo flights away from Schiphol.
Right.
And some of the charter operators are actually talking about moving away from Schiphol. So
KLM says it's very worried here in this article. I'm just seeing it in small type on the screen.
Right. Yeah. So I think that Lelystad Airport is just very close to. So I don't understand how this is going to impact stuff. Moving flights to other airports. How does that help the environment? Maybe.
It's carbon emission. Right.
Yeah, I think that at the end of the day, long taxi times at Schiphol has always been a problem. They got one runway that's actually, I think, almost based in Belgium, right? So the Polderbaan, which is far, far, far away. It's like a 15, 20-minute taxi, there are areas, Lelystad Airport is close by, Rotterdam Airport is close by. It's not really a challenge to get to either one for people who live in the Amsterdam-Caption area. But it's an interesting thing that they decided to do that, KLM will be reacting. If it's an environmentally smart thing to do, I don't know if you move the traffic anywhere else. I mean, I guess it'll run smoother, and it also maybe the security lines will be shorter. It seems like a really silly thing to do, but what do I know?
It's politics. It doesn't have to make sense.
There you go. That's absolutely true, and I think that would be a very good. That would be a very good ending till today's. It's politics. It doesn't have to make sense. That's a very good ending to the show of today as we go towards 9:00. Rudy, do you want to take it away?
Thank you to Fleming Poulsen over in Scandinavia. Thank you for Tommy Danielson near Sacramento. And I'm in LA, but when I next talk to you, I'll probably be back home in St. Paul, Minnesota, where it is actually summer, even in June and July. So nice talking to you today. Keep in mind, this was done live on Tuesday, January 28th at
June.
9. I keep saying January. Why? I'm stuck in it. Live in Minnesota. It's always January. Tuesday, June 28th at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. So keep that in mind when you're evaluating the information we're giving you today. See you soon.